And I'm going to be sad if the recording does what it did last week.
We did okay though. It had all worked out.
It was your finest hour. Like
It was. That's my finest hour, huh?
I mean, do you think? I mean, is there a number two? I don't know. Like, what do you like? Just help me out.
Name a finer. You know what? Okay, now you're that way. So, hey, I actually thought until mere moments ago, what I'm going to describe to you is going to sound like a vivid dream, but I assure you this actually happened. There is a car parked outside of the office here on the litter box side where we record. This car was parked roughly 4 feet from this microphone, with its windows down, blaring in a loop, "Eye of the Tiger."
Were you imagining needing to walk outside? It's like, excuse me, sir.
No,
I'm about to start a podcast.
Excuse me, we are podcasting in here, and I will thank you. No, I mean, I have like obviously so many thoughts. First of all, I'm like, what's going to be next after "Eye of the Tiger"? And so it gets through "Eye of the Tiger" and starts playing "Eye of the Tiger" again. I'm like, okay, no, that's not good. Okay, we're in an "Eye of the Tiger" lose. One "Eye of the Tiger" fine. And then I'm envisioning we're going to end up with like, people are criticizing us for not having intro music. It's like, well, how do you like us now? We've got "Eye of the Tiger" and a DMCA takedown on YouTube. So I'm kind of envisioning that.
Not just intro, background music.
Totally background music. The mic is definitely picking it up. And then like, what am I going to say? Yeah, what am I going to get? I did actually go outside because you get that moment of like, is my phone playing sound right now? You have that moment where like your phone just kind of like spontaneously starts playing something. It's like, is my phone somehow playing "Eye of the Tiger"? I mean, how can it be this loud in here? But no, it was "Eye of the Tiger." But no, it's all good now. And then all of a sudden it just stopped. So, and they drove on. I'm not sure if they just thought better of it. But I also thought then I was having, a little bit of kind of like Rocky 3 vibes where I can do the kind of the training video where, you and I are both like running in the rain or whatever, getting ready for the podcast. So it feels like a good little
little montage.
Little montage. Exactly. So here we are.
Yeah. And you wrote a podcast. You wrote a blog over the weekend.
I wrote a podcast too. Yeah, I wrote a little blog entry. Actually, so our colleagues Matt Keeter and Cliff Biffle wrote blog entries and talking about this really pretty interesting bug. I'm not sure how much you'd followed that particular issue, Adam. It was super interesting.
I was not following it live, but the blogs are great. And I remember Matt's blog post. When did he? Because that was a while ago that he wrote that first one. Did that first piece of work, right?
He did that a while ago, being like a couple weeks ago. It wasn't that long ago.
Yeah. Ages ago.
It's exactly ages ago. And and then so really like innovative and important work, and then it kind of unearthed this really interesting regression. And I mean, it did strike me when we hit this. And of course, so the way we hit this is, I'm not sure if you were in the office that day, but I was. Yeah. The switch that Aryan was throwing this on was right behind my head as I'm, working, whatever. And the fan starts blaring and I'm kind of giving Aryan like the total stink eye of like, hey, can you get your dog back on the leash over here? And then it's like, clearly he's kind of struggling with it a little bit. And then the fan dies down and then he kind of wanders over. He's like, has anyone changed the I2C code recently? And of course I had changed the I2C code recently. I'm like, it's happening again. Like I should never have given Aryan the stink eye because this is my bug. So I was, needless to say, like very engaged to look at it. And fortunately I was like, oh no, this is actually weirder. This is not this. This is something else. And but it was really quick to debug. And I think it was definitely interesting to me. I actually was extremely grateful for it because that day was just like wall to wall with like other conversations. And that was kind of like my one moment of technical contribution, was being able to help debug this. But it was an interesting object lesson. And I'm like, there's a lot that's kind of interesting here. And Cliff hit on a bunch of stuff that I had occurred to me as well. And he hit on some stuff that actually had not really occurred to me, but of course was also very apt. And in particular, Cliff hit on a bunch of these cultural issues that were really interesting and were really true. It was not the first thought that had kind of popped into my head, but like that actually is a big deal. And these kind of cultural things that we really take for granted. And as I was I wanted to write up a blog entry that kind of pointed to both Matt's blog entry and Cliff's blog entry. And I'm like, actually these kind of cultural issues are interesting. And so that's what, with everyone's forgiveness, that's what I really wanted to hit on. So that's what I hit on in this blog entry on engineering a culture. So talking about kind of the certain things that we have done at Oxide and kind of, what you can and can't do when you're engineering a culture. And of course, Adam, I'm like, didn't we do an episode on this? Like, why is this all this is all a little too familiar. And we did an episode like 2 years ago on this. And which I don't know. I went back and re-listened to that. I don't know if you you listened to any of that, but it was a good episode. It was interesting.
Yeah.
And there's Tom kind of describing how Amazon's values came about later than we would have guessed. So I think that's a great conversation about values in particular. So I don't think we need to belabor that kind of aspect of culture. I think and Adam, you had a really good summary there at the end of that podcast about like, hey, pick your companies carefully. These things are not totally immutable, but they can be hard to change. And with respect to values. But what I wanted to get into here, again, with kind of everyone's forgiveness, but I one of the things I've begun to appreciate is some things that we do and that any company does. For example, any company has things that they do that feel very natural that then to someone else is going to be like, oh, that's kind of different. I'm okay. Yeah, that's surprising. And I guess I'm a little bit surprised about some of the ones that are surprising. And in particular, I was with a group of CTOs over the week and midweek, and we were describing demoing, like how people demo. And you were like, this like wouldn't even occur to me to be a conversation to have with people. Like, doesn't everybody demo their work? But as it turns out, people do this really, really differently. Okay. This is kind of a relief that you're as surprised as I am by this.
Well, both. So I remember when we started demo day, that it was really important. It felt like a real moment, and it was not obvious, at least to me, that was what we needed, or that it was going to become such a cultural lodestone.
I think that's right. I think it wasn't obvious at the time. It feels so important. I don't know how it wasn't, but it really wasn't. I think you're right. I think it's Sean Klein had kind of started this with a control plane. And remember, Aryan actually at one point is like, hey, I'm like watching these demos and I'm really jealous. And I want to go demo the stuff that I'm like, I want to be able to go demo stuff too. Like, where can I go to demo stuff? I'm like, well, maybe we should just like throw the door open, which is what we did. But here's what was surprising about the way other people do this, or maybe even shocking. Like, I was talking to another CTO. I was like, I was in an organization and demos were really unpopular. Like, that seems strange. So they demoed every 3 weeks. Every group was required to demo. They had 120 people, so big engineering team, and on the order of like 6 people in a group. And you do the math on that, and that's 3 minutes a demo to fit in an hour.
Yeah.
And it's like, that sounds awful. Like every
by construction. Yeah.
That sounds awful by construction. Every group has to have a 3-minute demo. It's like, man, I am never going to take demo day for granted again. And it was really surprised that we have a totally unstructured, whoever shows up the demo kind of a model. But I think it's been a really important feature of the model.
Yeah. Like I think I'm sure that behind the scenes you're gently encouraging folks when you see great work to put it in front of people.
Oh, okay. That is true. I actually thought you were going to say behind the scenes. I'm sure you are like organizing this. So this is not actually us like just doing a crowd, jumping into the crowd every single Friday, but we are actually jumping into the crowd more or less every single Friday.
For sure. But like, I do it too, but probably less frequently. Like when I see something cool or I'm like, someone's got some work planned. It's like, that'll make a great demo. Go demo that. It's a great way to share. It's a great forum to share.
Yeah, I think it's good too, because I actually really like people being able to provide full context for that, for what it is, and what you're about to see and why it's hard. And because I think it's also really important for people to appreciate it. Just like, it's just hard for people to appreciate why everything is hard, in part because we have to like create our own layers of abstraction. Like Bob is working on this problem, and I can't I can't get every single detail of this, because then it doesn't. I mean, I need Bob to work on this problem, but that also allows you to kind of lose sight of like what Bob is suffering through, and it's important that we get those details, that we can see some of those details, and you kind of do it in a way that is interesting and exciting to people and uplifting. And I think, and Alan's raising this point in the chat, that it's another really, it's like you can fail in a demo. If the demo doesn't work, and I remember in early days, Adam, remember how many of those demos turned into like group debugging sessions?
Oh, totally. Especially when we were demoing the kind of macro demo of the control plane and of the software. That they all turned into demo sessions, right? It was all, debug sessions. It was all just, let's get as far as we can and then figure it out together.
I am also amazed at how many of our colleagues can debug their own work on the fly, like quickly. It is like absolutely stunning when people are like, God, that totally blew up. Oh, wait a minute, I see what I did. I'm like, how do you see what you did? Like, I definitely don't see what you did.
Yeah, there was one in particular from this past Friday when they sort of had it dead to rights, and I was kind of still wrapping my head around, what problem we were solving.
Yeah, and so having kind of an environment where people can do that has turned out to be really important. And again, I would just assume that everybody does this, but I guess not. I would think
it's weird to me that you think that, because have you ever been in a company where anyone did that? And like, we didn't do that. Like, we used to be a company that didn't do that.
That is
it's true. So I'm not sure why you're so surprised that the thing that we didn't used to do, other people don't do.
Other people don't do it. No, you're right. Right. No, you're absolutely right. It just feels like, but doesn't it feel like extremely natural? Is that just not, it also,
to us, yes.
Here's the thing. Look, we do a lot of weird things at Oxide. In fact, I was with an old friend a couple weekends back, Adam, and he was like, oh God, you guys do so many weird things. I want to know about all of the weird things you do. Like, we're not that weird. And I'm like, well, actually, oh, no, hold on. There's another thing you should know. Actually, hold on. There's another thing that's occurring to me. It's like, we actually are a bit idiosyncratic. And I think that like some of the things that we do are going to be really hard for a company to replicate. Honestly, just even forget uniform salary, just transparent compensation is not something that a company can easily adopt. That is really, really challenging. So it's like, I get it. Like, that one's going to be really hard. But I think there's other things we do that like, no, I think actually any company can kind of experiment with this. And this one, demo day, feels like that. Like a ad hoc, regular, unscheduled or unplanned, unstructured demos feels replicable. Or is that crazy too? I don't know. Am I just so warped?
You know what? I think anyone can try it. And I think that it will not attach in a lot of places, and it will attach some. So I think that we have, we work with like people who like the theatrics of it. I mean, as we've seen in some demos where sometimes people pretend like it's driven off the rails, but in fact, that was all part of the bit, or someone chimes in and it turns out to be part of the bit. So I think we work with folks where there's a certain amount of showmanship. And bravado and bravery, candidly, because but then as that becomes the cultural norm, it takes just a little bit less bravery to get up there. Conversely, I think I think I can only remember maybe one demo Friday where maybe there wasn't a demo.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe ever. But imagine if you had two of those in a row. The third would feel very high stakes. And if you started having three where people didn't really have something to say something, then, it might kind of dry up. So I think that there's some amount of luck, and just the culture becomes what you make it, becomes what you do. And, but certainly low stakes, try it everywhere. But, I don't know that I have perfect confidence that it would attach, even in some of the companies that I've worked for, some of the organizations I've worked for, or maybe even Brian, at Oxide, before we did it. I think there's a time early on when I'm not sure it would have really thrived, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that these are all very valid points. I also think that, this is kind of interesting because, one of the questions that kind of came up when we had this previous conversation 2 years ago, but also when we were talking about doing this conversation today, people were like, how do you change a culture? And I think, Adam, you make an interesting point about like the culture kind of is what you do. And this also might be an interesting way of like moving a culture, shifting a culture just a little bit. So people are asking like, hey, are these demos of personal projects or are these planned work? So definitely not personal projects, although we have had people who are like, hey, listen, like I've been playing with jujitsu, not jujitsu, the martial art, although maybe that too, but jujitsu, the JJ, the
Git wrapper? Is that a fair
Git wrapper? That feels pejorative.
Someone say JJ. I think I'm contractually obligated.
You just appear. Steve just appeared when that happened. That's amazing.
No, I know what you're referring to as JJ. I actually refer to as Sorry, Steve. Go ahead. You've conjured.
No, this is Rain. Rain did a good demo on JJ because some people at Oxide are using JJ, and it's cool to share that with other coworkers. It's like, hey, you may also enjoy using this as well, and like that's not work exactly, but it's work adjacent enough. Or like sometimes people's personal projects are close enough to work, and or like there's like some blurriness there that like it might be useful.
So to answer the question, it's all very work-ish. It's all very like stuff that we're doing, but it's also not always like, hey, this is what I am working on right now. It's sometimes like, hey, this is something that's interesting that I tripped on, or something I had to take a quick kind of sojourn over here. So it is all work adjacent, I would say.
But even that speaks to a certain freedom that we have in our culture, which is to say, there isn't some master task list that people are plucking things off of. And it's not some sprint where you're supposed to be doing items 1, 2, 3, and 4, where you'd have that fear where if you had done items 1 and 2 and then took some sojourn, that you'd say, well, if I demo this thing, everyone will wonder what happened to items 3, 4, and 5 or whatever. So people have a lot of flexibility and freedom in terms of prioritizing how they spend their time.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that we also, also importantly, I encourage people to demo for its own sake. It's not something that is like, you're not required to give, whatever N demos per M time or what have you. So it's not, and certainly not having the entire team demo would be, would be really, I don't understand. I just think you would give the term demo a bad name. And isn't like demo an agile thing too? Isn't this like epic story demo? I don't know. There's so many nouns now. I don't. So
I think that like, my favorite kind of work adjacent fun demo was, and Andrew came on the show to talk about his work with Wicket, our kind of our TUI, our text-based UI for doing initial setup, and he embedded like a game into it where you drop Oxide racks into a truck that is moving across the bottom of the screen, and it's just so quaint and delightful in the midst of like this setup app. It's awesome.
And am I remembering this correctly? Wasn't he terrible at the game?
Like, he was garbage at it. Just like it's like he had never played before.
Like he had never seen this thing before. I mean, it's just like I guess you've been busy, adding an Easter egg for that. But yes, that's right. That was that was fun.
But without fear. And like, I mean, Andrew's not a person who like has fear as it is. But I think this is an organization where you can show up and show how you embedded an Easter egg into it, and it was like sort of clearly time boxed, but also really fun and in keeping with the values of the company, and something delightful. And so, you can present it without fear, without anyone saying, hey, you did this, but you didn't review my code, or you did this, but you didn't fix my bug or whatever.
Right. It's something I'm always afraid of, that that someone's going to look at something's like, you had time to like this tweet on Twitter, but you didn't have time to review my code. It's like, okay, look, sorry. You're right. I know you're right. But no, it's true. And I think that then that, and I also love that it is not limited to a particular domain has been great. And we've gotten I mean, I've got so many demos that I love, but I loved Augustus demoing the integration that he had built into Salesforce, where someone coming into Salesforce could automatically have a silo provisioned on. I just thought it was like, and using Dropshot. I mean, you must have loved that demo because that was
it was outstanding.
Building on a bunch of work that you've done, which I also actually really love. Is that another kind of aspect? And again, I don't know how much of this is like our culture versus just like something that someone could go build readily in a different culture. But I love that so much of the work that we demo builds on the work of other people. And it is really satisfying to see someone else using the thing that you built to do something that's like, wow, I didn't really intend it to be used that way, but that's really neat. Or maybe I did intend it to be used that way, but I've never, actually seeing someone build on top of it is really kind of uniquely satisfying.
Yeah, no, totally. Just seeing the things that you thought of as like, a reach in terms of technical work, then other people just building on top of it. And this might come out as weird, but kind of taking for granted, not to say that they're like, oh, this is just work that doesn't matter, but rather just like building on top of that as foundational,
Right.
The thing that you thought was like kind of exciting.
Right. The thing that you're still like holding your breath to run, and they're just like casually like, oh no, it's like, I'm just using this thing. You're like, oh, that thing, like, okay, yeah, does it work for you? Wow, okay, great. It's like,
I mean, on that topic, literally every time I demo like userland dtrace to folks, like there is a part of me that holds its breath as I'm like, okay, are we instrumenting the instructions properly? Like I still have that anxiety.
Yeah,
we are folks. Like we are, like it works. But every time I just like a little.
But like, why would you say that? Like, why would you volunteer that unless you are like? I mean, clearly, like, what do you? Of course, it works. Why are you saying? Wait, why are you saying that? It's like because it barely works. It works.
It used to really not work too. That's true of all technology, right? That is why we have like trepidation around it. But before it worked, there was a long time when it didn't.
Yeah, and I remember like also, I mean, Lukeman on the demo of the actual full rack coming together was also like a big one. Yeah. It was that was a huge milestone. It's like it's been so that's been really great. But as you say, yeah, it shouldn't feel obvious that everyone does this because we ourselves didn't do this. So yeah, dummy. Of course, it's not obvious. It wasn't obvious to us, but that one has been really great and something that I think you could do pretty lightly. I also think that like if it were a bust, it would be kind of interesting why. Like it may help understand, like for example, if it's a bust because demo goes poorly and then someone like there is a lot of fear associated with that. It might be kind of interesting thing to dig into. Like, all right, why is that? Like, why are we afraid to, I mean, this is like the safest environment we should have or failing, namely like kind of in the privacy of our colleagues. It's just like just us and our colleagues here. We're not putting it on the podcast. As I don't know, have you had people do this to you? I've been now an increasing number of people tell me things, but like, hey, this is like in confidence. I'm like, no, that's fine. Like not for the podcast. I'm like, all right, I get it. Like, am I that loose? It's like everything. Like I'm not just,
I think it speaks volumes that nobody has said that to me, and I'm sure plenty of people have said that to you.
Oh my God, Diet Coke almost came
flying out of this mic. I made a joke of water cooler sometime last week that was like, this is like also kind of like a podcast, and everyone was like, absolutely not, Steve. We're not doing a podcast. I like talking about just to my coworkers. No one else needs to hear this. I was like, I know. I was just joking. I was just saying. It kind of gets
okay. Actually, Steve, I'm glad you mentioned this because I did not mention this in the blog entry, but this is another thing that is an idiosyncrasy. That's exactly the kind of thing I'm after in this conversation today. Steve, could you describe water cooler? Because I think that's kind of interesting, especially for a remote company.
Yeah, so it's funny because like I forget what the original description of this meeting was, but it was one of those things. It's called the Daily Water Cooler, and it's basically like right before I eat lunch, which is very convenient. So right before I eat lunch, I get to hang out with my coworkers and like talk to them. And like now we have three or four Texan Oxide folks, but like for a while I was basically, by myself or where somebody else is like 45 minutes away in Austin. So I rarely get to see everybody. And so it's really nice to have a meeting that's just like hang out with your coworkers and just don't talk about work. And about 99% of the time it like is not about work. And so we usually have a decent, some people never show up. Other people are there literally every day and just kind of like, hangout time to get to know each other better. And I think it's really good in terms of like, a lot of people talk about like, oh, you got to be in the office to have a culture. And it's just not really true. Or at least not in the way that we do it. It's like worked out pretty well where I feel like I know my coworkers, even though I don't get to see them physically every day.
Yeah, and so Emily in the chat is saying, "Hey, we do that kind of weekly, but I feel like I'd have a hard time getting folks more often than not." I think part of the key is like you just got to make it shrink to fit, and so we do it daily, and it's like whoever shows up, and it's okay if if sometimes there are there are only a couple people there, and sometimes there are like a lot of people there, and it ends up being kind of deliberate. It's very light. It's people talking about stuff that you'd kind of talk about at the water cooler. It's a lot of, okay, Steve, what percentage of it is us being trolled by whatever's on the internet? Probably.
Oh, I mean, like
a decent
half
fraction.
Of it,
like half,
yeah,
right.
Yeah, totally.
I was going to go with 80%,
or you and me. Yeah, right.
Right, but like if you want to talk about like Sam Bankman-Fried's sentence, too light or not heavy enough, it's like sorry, I guess
we also had the daily update on the royal family going for a while recently. That was a popular recurring theme. We used to do yes, yes, no a long time ago. We haven't done that in a little bit.
So so Steve, the origin of that, for whatever it's worth, I think we were doing that by the time you joined. Yes, maybe.
Yeah, because it used to kind of be like, Steve, did you hear this post on Twitter? And I was like, of course, Brian, I've already heard this post on Twitter. And we'd basically just do that, But yeah, like I had been introduced to Yes, Yes, No, the podcast because of us talking about it in Water Cooler. I had not heard of it.
But we were doing Water Cooler when you joined the company in the summer of 2020. Yes. And so I think that we'd started that just previously. And this is this was because Adam, my memory is that is a post-pandemic, because Cliff in particular reached out to me being like, hey, I am like, locked in my house and I need some human contact that's light. I'm like, all right, let's just do this every day. And kind of whoever shows up. And so my memory of that was a kind of a pandemic creation that ended up being, I think, really good for a remote company. It's a really good way to get to know people, I feel, and to get to learn more about them.
Totally. I mean, we started. I mean, we've been remote, or having some members of our team remote. I think since I joined.
Yeah, since the beginning.
which was pretty early, January 2020, and I felt like I was going to the office for a long time. Obviously, I wasn't, because it was only a couple of months of commuting. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure we would have done it absent the pandemic, and I think that remote folks might never have, we might have never have figured out how to do things properly or in this capacity for remote folks. And we built a ton of momentum, as you say. I remember even we do a no meet Wednesday, and I remember you saying
another one.
You saying like, oh, let's not, but we won't do it on Wednesday, right? And I think all of us feeling like, no, like Wednesday is arguably one of the most important days, because it's like a moment to check in. It's a moment to go from, I'm doing my, or at least for West Coast folks, I realize, Steve, for folks in other time zones, it's like a kind of different moment of the day. But for folks on the West Coast, it's going from getting ready to being at work. And it's kind of timed at that transition.
Yeah, that's okay. So I'm glad because that's another thing that we do. And again, I know it's not unique to us, but not having meetings on Wednesdays.
That feels like the easiest one to bring somewhere else, where if they have not figured it out, you will be a hero. Just like having protected time is just, yeah.
That one was survival for me personally. Because I know I wasn't alone in this, but I was having, Steve, I can't remember when we started that, but I
remember you decreeing it, but it was pretty early on in my tenure. Like I remember you saying like, all right, let's do this now. Or at least I remember that. I remember becoming policy. Let's put it that way.
I did decree it. I actually did decree it. It's a bit out of character for me. I did decree. I had to, because I was the only focused time that I had was on weekends. And I'm like, this is not good. It is really not good when you're like, oh, I will wait until the weekend to have focused work time. I'm like, that is not healthy. And I could see that for myself. I'm like, that is not going to be sustainable for me. I'm going to break. I'm going to physically break if we do this. And so, yeah, it is definitely not the rule by decree is definitely not the way, but I feel on that one. I don't know.
This was a popular. The people rejoiced at the benevolence. No, I'm just
Yeah.
kidding.
No, for sure. I mean,
probably because I probably said that even just because, like, so recently on Hacker News, everyone has decided that you personally make every decision at the company, and I have to keep
which is
like,
either comical.
no, Brian did not name that repo. Cliff did actually, and like all this stuff. Because yeah, I also don't want to be like, Brian doesn't do shit. Why are you saying that he does all this stuff at the job either? You know, there's a balance to be there, right? But like, I think we're talking about culture, right? A lot of people, because like, you know, you are well known, assume that like you decree things all the time, and that's like not actually true.
Yeah. But I this one, I may have tried to get another finger on the revolver on this one. But I really needed that one. And I think that's been important. I think not just for me. I think that's been important for lots of people to get. And actually, you know, was really interesting for me is the degree to which that was also really important for Steve Tuck, our boss, right? That was important for Travis and sales. Like it was important for everybody to be like, I know I actually need like some time that I know I can get some extended time to work on the things that I need to work on. And like, yeah, not necessarily an engineering artifact. It's an email, or it's just like, it's, you know, dealing with this payroll provider or whatever it is. Right. It's been, that's been really, and I also think, I know some people do this on Friday. I personally love doing this on Wednesday. I don't know how people think about the day choice, but I like Wednesday because it gives you that like midweek island that you can grab on Tuesday.
I think that sometimes it can feel too, like if it's on Monday or Friday, it can feel too tempting to be like, well,
long
you
weekend.
know, yeah. Or at least that can be the perception. And yes. I think having it on Wednesday certainly gets rid of that perception.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that by getting it on Wednesday, so to me, it's been great. I think that it's also, I think it has also, at least for me personally, it has some kind of, we do demos on Friday. There's kind of this flow of the week where you've got demos on Friday, you got this kind of focused work on Wednesday. And plenty of us have been like, okay, I really want to work this Wednesday because I've got something I'm trying to get ready for Friday. So that's been another big like idiosyncrasy. I think also just like in general, the pandemic has been really important for us. And because we were, Adam, as you said, like we were remote from the beginning with Patrick joining the team, you know, the earliest in that kind of earliest tranche of folks, and being remote at a Minnesota. But it was only with the pandemic that we were all forced to be remote. And I remember being like early on to Patrick being like, this kind of sucks. He's like, yes, welcome. Yes. Yeah.
Finally.
Finally. What do you think I've been dealing with for 10 years, pal? But I feel like we got a lot of stuff working a lot better, including recording every meeting, which I know we've talked about here occasionally as well. And my prediction of Omnocracy, do we always talk about it in here? We talk about it a lot.
Some of us do.
Okay, I know. I get it. This is an intervention. But we do not record that daily water cooler. We don't record one-on-ones. It's not like we don't record every single conversation, but we do record every meeting. And that has been, I think that's been really huge. That's another one. I'd be really curious are other companies doing that? Because I feel that's a really good thing to go do. That's been really valuable for us anyway. We got some very early advice from Jeff Rothschild, who Jeff Rothschild was we had interviewed on the Metal and was dispensing some free advice, which is great from the formation of the company. And one of the things he said is make sure everyone's invited to every meeting. And recording every meeting is a way of basically assuring that. One of the questions was, do we record the demos? And we absolutely do. And that's recording the demo. It's been great to have people be able to kind of go back to past demos and watch them. The other thing that's been super valuable to do is recorded debugging sessions. And Adam, I'm not sure how much you have done this, I know like Alan has done this a bunch, and holy mackerel, is that valuable to go back to you're all working together to debug a problem. And it has been, I've gone back to those recordings for a bunch of different reasons. Sometimes you go back to a recording of a problem that like you worked on a while ago and then kind of had the drop and needed to come back to. It's really nice to go like watch a recording of yourself debug. So in particular, Nathaniel and I were debugging a power sequencer problem. I had to go work on something else. I came back to it like only like 3 or 4 weeks later, and I went back to watch the recording to kind of ramp up on it, and I did not recognize a single word I was saying. I was like, who is this
guy's
guy?
really insightful, right?
Like, man, this guy's got a lot of state on the problem. Like, let this guy solve the problem. I'm like, I literally had to like watch myself. I'm like, I need to rewatch myself to understand, like, past Brian, what did you know? Tell me your secrets.
Yeah, my favorite one of those actually is one that I've wanted to do an Oxide and Friends on, but that what turned out to be the chip bug or the speculation bug. I'm not sure how much I'm supposed to reveal here, but
you can review as much as you want. And I know we do need to do an episode on this because no, you're right. This is a banger of a bug. Yeah.
But we had tons of people involved in the debugging sessions, throwing out lots of different ideas, and there was debugging, I feel like, around the clock. So it gave you an opportunity, like you didn't have the FOMO of like, okay, if I drop off, that this is all just written on the water or whatever. But I can check back in and find out.
Yeah, it was like C-SPAN for debugging a problem. It was just like, like they've drifted out. There's only one person on the floor right now debugging. It was totally
that's right. Brian's still on there, just like reading the phone book, I guess.
I'm filibustering. And so these we are recording these in Google Meet. Because someone is asking, well, do you just get the audio or do you get the terminals? And then we have basically when someone's driving, they're sharing their screen. So you are seeing what they're kind of doing. And yeah, it is that one is super valuable too, Adam, because debugging is one of those things that scales really, really well with people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, because if you have, if you can get over that you've got, 20 people looking over your shoulder, but if you are if you have 20 people or more easily, like 5 or 6 people like watching someone debug, it is so valuable because someone can be like, I don't know, I got like, what about this idea? I mean, just kind of you can throw out ideas. And Adam, it was your idea actually, as if I recall, that we were looking at just wild data corruption that made no sense. And if I recall correctly, it was your observation that like, hey, that virtual address looks like, isn't that like just kind of close to the virtual address we saw earlier?
I mean, I saw this like clustering of addresses, and again, we should do a whole episode on this one and bring the whole cast of dozens who worked on it. But part of the parallelism you're describing is like I went out and pursued some kind of arguably stupid hypothesis of like, let me just look at these numbers and see where they are. Which if I was single threaded, if it was like one person working on it, you're like, well, that's like the 10th idea. So like we'll do that, but but only when we've exhausted literally every other avenue. Whereas, when everyone else has hands on keyboard, it gives the opportunity to go pursue lots of things in parallel.
Yeah, and I mean that also feels like something that pretty much anyone can. Maybe a bunch of people are doing this. I think it'd be really interesting to watch. And this is an example of being remote is a huge, huge feature. Where if you are all together in an office, everyone's going to have to go into I mean, it's like very, very helpful to be remote. Another one, as long as we're on this subject, just the presence of the chat in a meeting. And again, I got to assume that like a lot of companies kind of culturally have this. Maybe not, but I assume they do at this point, where when you are a remote company, you have that chat that I have found to be really important as this like kind of parallel conversation that, and we definitely have a cultural acceptance of kind of witticisms and banter happening in the chat. But it's also really, really helpful when someone can ask a question and someone else can answer it in the chat without whomever is speaking having to like pause to answer it. I think that's a really important kind of thing.
I agree.
My favorite. Too old to adopt the fourth person pronoun, though. That hasn't happened in Oxide yet, but it's only going to be a matter of time, I think.
The fourth person pronoun? What do you mean?
We don't address chat as chat. Like we tend to like talk to individuals or like respond to people. Oh yeah, hey, thanks Brian for linking that thing. Yeah, totally. We don't say like, oh chat, like thanks chat.
The collective chat pronoun. Interesting.
Yeah. This is like a thing that's happening actively. Now amongst the kids, the youths, from what I'm told, is that the chat as like because you're so used to this being like a thing that in many cases, you're in a friends group and you'll say like, hey chat, what do you think about X or whatever. Yeah.
And is chat like a synonym for like, is it like peeps, or is this a synonym for
That's why I
like
say
hoi
fourth
polloi?
person pronoun, right? Is it's kind of like
Fourth person pronoun.
you're
Interesting.
referring to the group of the people who are not like who are present but are not like currently involved in the conversation directly is kind of the vibe. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. This is going to be. I'm now. Some of the things my daughter says around the house are now making a little bit more sense. Like, so when my daughter is addressing the chat at the dinner table, I think I know what's going on now.
Finally.
Yeah, finally.
Yeah, I mean, there is the quality of chat where, like, sometimes Steve, again, our CEO, other Steve, CEO and boss, will give a long presentation where there's been a very busy chat, and he'll say, "Okay, geez, I missed a lot of messages in chat." And Brian, often your summary is either it was all answered, or it was all blather, or kind of 50-50.
A little both. It was all
Yeah.
blather that was answered. It was all banter. Yeah, no, totally. No, I think it's actually, and I think again in all hands. Okay, so another thing that we do. I mean, I know like lots of companies have an all hands. I think that like the remote world has made it easier to do an all hands because it's like you don't have to physically. You can just get people together pretty quickly. I feel another thing that we do, and maybe this is just like a pure outgrowth of our transparency, but I think it's really useful the entire company to see what the board sees or going through our board deck. I don't know, Adam, what you feel about that one.
Yeah, I mean, I did that at my company as well. I agree that I think it's weird, right? I think that is idiosyncratic in that I think there is a mystique around the board where folks aren't necessarily feeling comfortable sharing that. Although I learned that from the company I was at previously, not a very transparent company, but one where the CEO, I think, did a great job of like sharing, explicitly not all of the content of the board deck, because there's some parts of the board deck that he couldn't share, which is fine. But I thought he did a good job in terms of like making sure that the company at large knows what's being represented to the board and that there are no surprises, and it also keeps everyone honest in terms of the material being presented to the, if I were on a board, I would love it to hear that the content was being presented to the team because I know I was not getting, BS.
I think so too. I think you'd almost think like a board member should be asking that question. Like, hey, are the rank and file seeing what you're presenting to us?
Yeah.
Because it's really important that we see what we're telling the board, and I think it's just what we're committing to and what kind of we're expressing as top priorities. So I think this is really important to kind of present that to give that transparency, and I can't imagine kind of doing it any other way, but I can appreciate that not every company would do it that way.
Yeah.
Other idiosyncrasies, we mentioned obviously recording every meeting. The one thing that just to get it out there, because I know this is something that can be a hot button, and I know it's perf season out there. So if you're going through perf wherever you are, we have no formalized performance review process, and that one I think is something that is, and I gave a presentation on this, years ago, but I just found that formalized review didn't actually solve any problem. It introduces a lot of problems, but doesn't solve any problems. Go ahead, Adam.
Can I ask, just a question? When you say we have no formalized review process, what do we have a review process?
Okay, look.
No,
yes.
I'm asking what formalized is doing. I'd like.
Right.
So maybe I've not done anything worthy of praise, is what I'm saying.
No. Okay. No. So I got you. I know. So we have
Adam, you haven't been keeping up with your performance numbers for the last year. I don't know what. I mean,
this explains a lot.
I don't read those emails.
That explains a lot. Okay. All right. This is all coming. Okay. So you weren't blowing me off, and yet you. I was amazed that you were. No. So okay. Look, when you say. I'm saying we have no formalized performance review process, and you're like, hey, pal, omit needless words. We could actually get rid of a bunch of things. So here's what I do. I do believe in feedback, especially, and this is hard, and I'm not. Something
you wouldn't have to do it in this forum, but okay, I'm ready. Go ahead.
I'm ready. Okay, yeah, are you ready? So Adam, I'd like you to sit down, please. Feeling
of the organization.
there's a feeling in the organization. Let me actually hold on. So actually, I'm going to hand back the paragraph that I had you write. I'm going to hand back to you with introduced grammatical errors as your formalized review for the year. No, so I think the thing that I do try really hard to do, and actually is increasingly important, especially as we get bigger, but just in general, I think that the most grievous sin of any kind of leadership is to not pass on positive feedback, which is actually an easier sin than it might sound. So in other words, like I really try when someone is praising a colleague to me, I'm like, let's go pass that on to that person. Let's make sure that that person knows. And because I think it's positive feedback is extremely important. And it's extremely important that people see like, hey, like the work that you did was important and is appreciated. I think that's the most important kind of feedback. And I think like feedback of like, hey, I think feedback where you're trying to adjust behavior or trying to like curtail negative behavior, I think is also important. But in general, I've always found that like there's a better bank shot. In other words, like the negative behavior is coming out of something else, and if you can kind of fix the other thing, the giving people like a direct feedback of like, hey, you need to do less of this. It's often that's going to backfire, is what I found.
Yeah,
but maybe
I think that's right. Let me try this out on you too, Brian, because I also think that. So first on the praise, on like positive feedback. First, like I think it's really easy to see something that someone else has done on your team and say, well, that person's an adult. Like I don't need to pat him on the head or whatever. Like, but nobody. I remember actually, this is years ago at Oxide, I was having a low moment. I can't remember why. I mean, probably because it was like the depth of the pandemic and whatever. But someone just said, "Hey, nice work on this thing," and it just filled me up so much. And I think that nobody's ever taken praise and turned around and be like, "What an asshole! Like, how dare you say that I did a good job on a thing?" Especially when you mean it earnestly. Like when I mean, obviously, if people have not done a good job and it's hollow praise, but when people see real work that you really appreciate, like it can feel not worth your time. It can feel redundant, but it is almost never unappreciated. I mean, it is almost always the right thing to do.
Yeah, I think and one further, I think that people feel that if I give praise for this, well, first of all, this thing is obviously praiseworthy. So this person clearly knows that what they've done is great. It's like, well, they may or may not know. So like you think they know because you think it's obviously great. Giving voice to that is probably a good idea. But I think also importantly, like you don't cheapen yourself by praising someone else.
No, especially when it's earnest, like you do if it's not earnest, right? But if it doesn't take anything away from you, right? It is not zero sum.
That's right, and I think it's really important to then, if you feel it, say it. Like if you're feeling positive feedback, like definitely say it, because I think it's just important that we know that, like, oh God, I didn't realize. Okay, yeah, I didn't realize that someone appreciated that, or oh, thanks. Okay. So that was, and then even if it was great, I think it's helpful to know, like, yeah, that was a really hard push, and it was great to get all the positive feedback. I mean, our colleague Ben Nacker recently demoed a new query language at Demo Friday. You might think like, what is wrong with you people? Like, how many must you reinvent everything? And the answer is like, no, but also yes. But there's a very good reason for a new query language, and I think there was such an outpouring of enthusiasm for that, which I think was great because Ben had been kind of slogging on that stuff. It's been like, it's hard, and I think it felt really great. So even though I was the nth person to say it, I wanted to make sure that I also added my own praise to the pile because it's great work, and it's important that people know it's like, no, this is important.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm going to go a little further out on the limb, which is when it does come time to like, when someone has stepped out of line, or when someone has done something that you find objectionable or whatever, it also makes it easier for you to say and for them to hear when there's that foundation of trust. On like, this person's told me other things that have been that have resonated and been positive. So when they're saying, this felt wrong or like wasn't right or whatever, I think it's on this foundation of trust.
Yeah, okay.
One of the most,
I see where this is going. Just give it to me.
yeah,
Just give it to me.
building. We're building to it. No, when I took some, I think the best management training I got was actually this positive coaching alliance
Yes.
for coaching Little League. And one of the things that stuck with me, it was great training. San Francisco Little League was terrific, but one of the pieces was that you need to have this ratio of 5-to-1 praise to critique, and 5-to-1 was the number that they gave for the 9-year-olds I was coaching. But I actually think like it's not a bad number, and whatever the number it is, it might vary, but it's not far off. And it's not like, and they made a great point of like, it can't just be ephemeral praise, but like, nice work tying your shoes, nice work showing up on time, like also like you're a terrible hitter. But needs to
right. Right.
Yeah.
I need to rattle off. Let's see. I got to dig up one more thing. So let's see.
Exactly.
You're wearing your pants. So congratulations.
Right, exactly.
Also,
Right.
it's like, God, you look lost at the plate. Can you? What is
just I don't even know how to coach you. You're so terrible. But I think again, to pick whatever ratio you want. Every human has like a different ratio, but people need it. Like if all they hear is negatives, then they just stop listening.
Yeah, and I actually think that just as an aside, if you've got a kid who is an athlete at all, is just engaged in athletics at all, you yourself should at least take this positive coaching alliance training. There's a bunch of stuff that I love out of that, because Adam, I took the same training when I coach baseball. One of them is just like, and I'm biased towards baseball. That's what my oldest is a big baseball player. I love next pitch. Next pitch is such a great life lesson. Namely that like, you just made a mistake. We need to focus on the next pitch. Just like it's, you got to brush it off and go to the next pitch, which I think is also great. And then I think that the thing that really stuck with me, that again, if you're a parent of a kid who is engaged in any athletic activity, be they terrific or be they really struggling, in terms of like how to engage with your own kid. And I just love that, like, just be sure to, like, if you want to talk to your kid after a game, just be sure you say, "Hey, I loved watching you play." Like, that's it. You don't need to. And I think that's great. I think that like that kind of that's the best feedback to give your kid is like, "I loved watching you play. I thought it was fun watching you play," and I think that just anyway. But just another huge plug for that positive coaching alliance. I think it's really good stuff.
Since we're riffing on that, there was one other piece that I love that actually is applicable, although it's initially not going to sound applicable. In the league that I was coaching in initially, it was like the players were, I think, 9 or 10, something like that, and the umpires were all these like 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, and they're like, well, if you disagree with a call and you, like a 6'1", 190-pound man, walk up to this 15-year-old, it doesn't matter how polite you're being. It doesn't matter that you're asking if he saw it properly or talking about the weather. Like the optics from 30 feet out are atrocious. Right. And so the advice they gave was, stand next to him. Imagine you're kind of looking at something off in the distance, look like side by side. But the thing that I took away from that kind of more broadly is there's a, regarding the artifact, not like your bug or your code or, kind of looking at it where we're putting our arms around each other's shoulders and looking at the problem together in way, because sometimes people can feel that responsibility, when there is a problem when there's a screw up or whatever, kind of move, like, even if I don't feel like a person is culpable, that person might feel like they're blaming themselves. I mean, I certainly blame myself. So doing everything you can to like really bring that kind of neutral disposition.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's really interesting, and because it can like it can be hard to step out of yourself on that. By the way, I feel thinking of myself. Matthew's asking in the chat if there's one change to Oxide culture that people could make, what would it be? And everyone is now chiming in. The chat wars have now begun.
I know.
I'll own it. I said, I don't know if this is culture, but moving away from Matrix. And my beef is not actually with Matrix. It's just that there are no good clients. And so therefore I kind of blame, I don't know anything about Matrix, the protocol. Technically, I don't really care about that. But like, all of the clients are just bad, and it's the least favorite part about my job. I don't know that I would necessarily advocate that we move to something else. Discord. Discord's not necessarily appropriate, actually, but like it is the only chat program I actually like using. So,
Steve,
I feel
I
bad
will
about suggesting that.
I will take your millennial and raise you an Xer, which is I miss email desperately. Like I understand that chat has taken over, but I feel like chat FOMO is really challenging. Like every once in a while, I'll be in the middle of some focused work or whatever, and some discussion will happen on chat, and someone will hit me up like, "Hey, you're going to really care about this thing," and it just kills me that like it needed to happen right then. Like at Wednesday at 2:13 in the afternoon is the time when we decided on chat this sort of critical thing. And I don't think that this is unique to Oxide. I think lots of folks have moved to like a chat first culture. In fact, my brother joined a company a while ago that like where email was forbidden. Like everything happened in chat.
Email was forbidden. Wow.
Basically.
You want the real cynical response to that?
Go.
Email stays around forever, but places like Slack have a retention policy that goes away. If someone's trying to do discovery on something that's old, then being chat first is
a lot of companies actually email doesn't stick around forever. Like my wife was in an organization where there are a bunch of companies that have like we destroy email as a policy. Good luck squirreling it away, kind of stuff. But fair enough.
Yeah, that's interesting. That well, first of all, that email. I mean, I'll see your Xer and like raise you a lost generation. Let's get back to like written letters. Let's send letters back.
If it's so important,
I'm not going to go out for carrier pigeons here. I'm just saying that, like, if we use carrier pigeon, then like things are much better.
Like, would it kill you to send me a singing telegram once in a while?
I thought one was enough, but at least that's what you told me. The thing that is amazing, Adam, is you go back through our past emails and like past lives, like from like the like the 2000s. It's like, yeah, we used to write really thoughtful emails,
long emails. Where people then could consider it and like not have to respond instantaneously. I mean, it was also, whatever, I'm giving a pitch for email, but it's nice also when you get back from vacation, like there are emails you can go through and sort of do your own prioritization to figure out what needs to be attended to, as opposed to chat where I'm like, I'm not reading all that. Like just write that down to 0 and start from scratch and hope that nothing too important happened.
So I gotta say, I'm with Emily in the chat, and I really miss Jabber. We had Jabber, which was exactly that. It was IRC with searchable logs, and we had to. I can't even remember, and if Josh or Patrick are here, can remember why we had to decommission Jabber. But we had to decommission Jabber, and we were using to Mattermost, which actually I actually did like Mattermost, but we had to decommission our Jabber server. So we gave it a Viking funeral, where the Jabber server was we had a bot that would rewrite things that the bot received with using like the chicken scheme font, and then there was an error in the bot where the bot began responding to itself, and the whole thing exploded in this like a glorious Viking funeral for Jabber. But and then we turned it off. I really miss Jabber. I thought Jabber was kind of great, but okay. So chat is going to be the thing that rips us apart. So thank you very much for asking us how we would change our culture. This is how we destroyed Oxide's culture in the great chat civil war of 2024. So thank you very much, Matthew, for firing the first shot there. I guess Cloudmike. I guess that's Steve. I guess that's on you. That's not on Matthew.
I took the bait immediately.
You're the one. Yeah,
really my fault. I'm encouraging it.
Yeah, pretty much. But that's it's definitely a good question. I do think like one of the important things is that like there is a mutability to culture. I mean, this is one of the things I think Cliff is always really good about expressing. I remember when much earlier in the lifetime of the company, someone was talking about the hiring process to Cliff, and Cliff's like, yeah, we think it's pretty good so far. And I just really liked that, like, so far, like we are, because you constantly have to look for places where we can reasonably improve things. And so I think we're except for chat, apparently, which is
well, actually, there's some kernel of wisdom there, which is constantly improving things, except for things like chat actually is divisive, and no matter what we chose, it would not clearly be better to everyone. So there is actually, I think, some wisdom to ignoring some of these problems where, like, look, people are going to grumble no matter what. I'm sorry. And that sucks. And there's no clear, better thing that we're going to do, like, clear to everyone. So I don't know, just toughen it up. Like, we just got to not poke that bear.
Yeah, I do think that there is, and I think it's like a challenge because I think that one of the things you want to avoid is where you do have things that are divisive, because other things are divisive. I mean, there are a lot of things that people at Oxide agree on, and there's some things people at Oxide vehemently disagree on, and you kind of want to just avoid those things, honestly, especially when they're not like exactly germane to what we're building. Which, I mean, chat kind of isn't. You know, it's important, but it's also, I don't know, it's in that it's very important to kind of our daily quality of life, but no. I do think it's actually super important to be able to search chat. So that's actually one of the things that, one of my own constraints, one of the things that drives me bonkers about Slack is that you don't own your own data. And it's like, that data is super important. And I mean, many times I have searched chat. I mean, I think, Adam, we really try to avoid making decisions in chat. But there's load-bearing discussions that happen in chat for sure. Being able to search back is really valuable for me.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it wouldn't be Oxide and Friends 2024 if we didn't anticipate an LLM future, because it does seem like both chat and transcripts of all these recorded meetings, it feels like there is some opportunity for distillation here, for helping people, sort and figure out what important things happened.
Totally. So yeah, hopefully, I know that would be, wouldn't that be nice? That would be, feels really nice. If you could have, like, actually, I don't need to pay attention to the bot. My alter ego is going to be watching chat for me.
And maybe you can respond for me too. Be like, I don't like that.
And you got to
has a very interesting related feature here. They've started rolling out in beta to some places. I've not seen it on this server yet, but they will send you a push notification that is like, hey, these folks are talking about this topic in this channel right now. And it's very funny how accurate and also not accurate it is, basically, like, sort of at the same time. Like, sometimes it gets the technical, like, semantics correct, but like with a description that's like a little funny or like not how I would describe it or whatever. But it's definitely kind of an interesting, weird, like, the first time I remember seeing it, I was like, what is going on right now? Yeah, like there's something happening there.
Yeah, that will be that. Talk about, like, hey, I think these people are talking about you over here. It just feels like it feels like a middle school gossip. That's just like, you should know that they're.
I want the one that says, hey, those people are talking about you, so I sent an email with the germane details. Read it at your leisure.
Sends you an email. There you go. You could. This could
Meet
be
me
like,
where I am. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, this is like the Jitterbug phone that's in like a giant font, only has like 4 buttons or whatever. It is constantly advertising itself on the nightly news. This could be, there we go. I can already see the commercial. It's like, another chat message. Why doesn't anyone send me an email anymore? Now they do. Thanks. What would you call that friendly email bot? You would need to have something that would like give a little tip of the hat to the 90s. It's going to be something that's going to need to be like email companion or something like this. I don't know what it's going to be called.
Yeah.
Resurrect Microsoft Bob. Microsoft Bob, in hindsight, like maybe ahead of its time. No, if we revisited Bob, is it time to revisit Bob? I know that high pitched. I know what that means.
Yeah,
I know what that means.
Moving right along, right?
Let's tell you what. I will forget that you ever said that, Brian. If you forget that, another one that is important to me that I think is also a little unusual, sadly, is that we don't use engineering metrics, which is to say metrics by which we evaluate engineers. I say that with like one, I've kind of used metrics once in my life, Adam, and I think you know what I'm going to talk about.
I have no idea.
When we,
I do.
When we quantitatively showed that you, as a very junior engineer, were doing more work than an entire remote office that we knew was just not very engaged. And I feel like but I feel like even that because we made you kind of aware of that metric that we had done this.
Oh yeah, you know who else was aware of it? The remote office that I then visited.
Oh really?
Please continue. Yeah. Anyway,
was that awkward? Did they hold you?
No, they loved
hostage?
me. They were so happy to see me.
I bet. Sorry.
Yeah. No. Whatever.
Because I mean, part of I think that like you just have to be super careful because people will change their behavior for those metrics, and I've just seen behavior not get changed in the way you want. It's really and you end up. I mean, I'd not say that it's impossible to do, but boy, you got to be super careful about how you. I mean, certainly you look at like lines of code or Git pushes or blah blah blah. It's like every one of those is going to be really. I mean, you can kind of I guess view it as maybe telling you something that you already thought you knew, but really dangerous to index more heavily than that. I don't know, Adam. What do you think?
No, totally agreed. I've never been in a culture though that really embraced any kind of quantitative basis for engineering productivity. But agreed, it feels like the things that are easy to measure would all produce exactly the wrong behaviors, and everything else is really hard to measure and quantify. I have not seen it done well.
I've not seen it done well, and I think and then it is often done very poorly, and people then are often it's used to be like, because you have this idea of like, I mean, there is this perception, especially among people who are outside of software. Like, let's just talk about the elephant in the room. There's a perception that software engineers are lazy. Like, what are these folks doing? Like, I just don't know. Like, why is our software late? It just feels like these guys are like arguing over which chat to use or whatever. It's like, what are they actually doing? They're and I think that it feels like when metrics are put in place, they're replacing trust or undermining it. Like, look, I'm not going to trust you. I'm actually going to measure you. And I think there's just a big danger to that. I think that like it does undermine trust, and it doesn't. I don't know. I think it's the wrong. It takes a culture in the wrong direction.
I'm with you. I also think that organizations can sort of lose track of what's important. And I think usually that is a failure of leadership, either engineering leadership or company leadership. But if you lose track of the mission, then it's easy for folks kind of seeing the black box of engineering and like, well, the stuff I want isn't coming out of there. And the stuff that is coming out of there isn't really stuff that I want.
This is stuff that I want.
So how, like, what are the levers that I have? And I'm sure it's a very, especially as organizations grow, it's frustrating. Like, it's frustrating. And then the engineers are always talking about technical debt, whatever that is. Sounds like some made up thing or whatever.
Totally.
So I get where it comes from, and it does seem like the wrong response to what I'm sure is a very frustrating situation. And there are lots of folks, lots of snake oil that people want to sell along these lines.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. In terms of there are a lot of, I mean, okay. So had you heard of DORA metrics? I mean, and this is stupid. I'm sure you have.
DORA, like DORA the Explorer metrics?
DORA the Explorer metrics, but all caps DORA. This is like, okay. So so DORA metrics are, I think, pretty common. This actually makes me feel better that you hadn't heard of it, honestly, because I was in a conversation where people were like, how are you the only person who's not heard of DORA? I'm like, I don't know.
Were you like, I know about the OODA loop.
I know about the OODA loop now. And they're like, OODA loop? Like, no one's talked about the OODA loop for 5 years. Like, did you? Okay. Don't tell me you just learned about the OODA loop.
Like, no, of course not.
No, please.
No, I've been doing OODA loop for years.
I'm going to integrate it into all my future decisions now that I know about it.
So. Exactly. No, this is the DevOps research and assessment and this is
okay. Thanks. I hate it.
And so this is it is like trying to use. So it uses metrics like frequency of deployments, amount of time between an acceptance and a deployment, how frequently deployments fail, and how long it takes to restore service or recover from a failure. Those are DORA metrics. And
I mean, those seem like things worth measuring. I don't know.
They seem like things worth. Yeah, totally. Well, this is like where, and this is kind of where this is like the path to ruin with these metrics, where it's like they do feel plausible, and the mistake is in over indexing on them. Like, I mean, yes, like, I mean, I don't know about frequency of deployments. I'm like, oh God, I got to be careful with that one, because
no, that's some real kind of cargo cult stuff going on. I mean, where is that really what you need? Is that really what you're talking about? Like, it can be, it might be, but it can also be that you are parading around with coconuts on your head to make like airdrops happen.
That's right. And then, I mean, like, looking at how frequently deployments fail, I think that again, that's valuable. What are you going to wire that up to? I mean, so it's like, okay, what does it mean if that metric, because what you don't want is to be so enshrining these metrics, and God forbid you start connecting these metrics to things like compensation or things that like, where people feel like, oh God, like I don't want, I'm kind of changing the way I think about the problem, not because of what the metric is trying to measure, but because of the metric itself. It's like, that's not good. I mean, for example, like how long it takes to recover service or recover from a failure. Like, okay, that's important, right? But that also highlights and then like how frequently deployments fail. That also is very important. But there's a big natural tension there where, so if you've got a service and you know that restarting the service will likely ameliorate the immediate problem, but it will also lose state that you need to debug it. What do you do? And
exactly. Right. And you've just told people, you just gave people the answer when the answer really is, it depends.
Right. The answer is it depends. And it's like, if you want to not see this problem again. So it's like by shortening the time it took to restore service, you actually could have increased the frequency with which you actually lose service, because you are losing the opportunity to debug it. And so, oh boy, you got to be super, super, super careful. You can not stop. And I'd be curious to know if other people have got like, no, I've got like great experiences with this, and this has been really, really important. And I mean, I get it. I just think you got to be super careful.
Yeah.
So what are some of the other idiosyncrasies? I'd be curious if other folks have idiosyncrasies in their own organization or with their own experience. Steve, I don't know if you've got any from kind of
RFDs. Yeah. Our RFDs are hugely idiosyncratic.
I guess they are. Yes, they are.
Mean, the fact that we are, what number are we up to now? Like, are we like at 470 or something like that?
We got to be very close to 500. We got to be knocking on the door. I'm going to say like 494. I'm not looking.
You always nail those. Like when you guess the number for RFD.
No, but what are we at?
But it is the most recent one, according to the website, not ones that have been like, on GitHub or whatever, is 465.
465. Oh, okay. Okay. Then you know what? That graph has not moved up into the right enough. Speaking of metrics, our RFD production is down this month.
This quarter, you're never going to get your bonus, boss.
Right. There's an RFD gap here, folks. I need to gather the team. I have something to tell them.
These are requests for discussion. So this is kind of our best and only artifact of like, here's something I plan to do. Here's a gap. Here's something I want to change. Here's a technical area where I want to go deep. And sometimes it really is a discussion more than, we had one recently that Karen put together, surveying all the different query languages for different metrics from different cloud providers. And actually, Brian, that led to the work that you referenced earlier, Ben's work on our own query language. So you can have RFDs on a variety of different topics, some of which really come to some conclusion, some of which are a little more open-ended and informational. But man, we have a lot of them. I think that when folks join, there isn't a fairly insurmountable, like you can't read them all, right? We are both have a volume of words. I don't know what it is, but it's got to be in the several millions, maybe tens of millions. Volume of words and rate of production that you can never catch up to.
Yeah, and I think that all true. The RFD site, which is Steve Gladbeck's putting it in the chat, has been open sourced relatively recently. So Ben Leonard has done terrific work on the RFD site, and along with Augustus and Crespo, a bunch of folks have done really great work on it. The RFD site has allowed us to, I mean, God, just being able to search RFDs. Adam, remember when we couldn't search RFDs? It was really bad.
Yeah.
And actually, well, this is like where I want. I mean, talk about LLM help. I actually tried relatively early on in the company to make a glossary of terms in RFDs, and I just collapsed under the weight of it all, because there's just so much that you need a glossary for. So I think that, but that has been really having that's been really great. And what we wanted feels like there should be another tool that does this, namely. You want a Google Docs kind of front end on a Git back end using like an ASCII doc as the medium.
Yep.
Right. I mean, that's kind of what we want. And then we do use GitHub for the discussions, which has all of the issues of GitHub as a discussion medium, which is good. I mean, there's some things about it that are really good, but it's been, that's been really, RFDs. That's true. That is an idiosyncrasy. And that actually we brought over from Joyent, but I adopted. What's that?
You got to say what it is for the recording. Nobody's going to know what Sean said in chat if you just answer.
What did Sean say in
oh, sorry. I thought you were responding to thing. I made a dumb assumption. Sorry. Sean said something really good about RFDs, and it sounded like that's what you're about to talk about. And so I was like, oh no, you're not saying what it is.
No, no. Go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead, Steve.
So I was just saying that like it's nice coming from a big company that like RFDs, like you can write an RFD and someone else can implement it, or you can implement an RFD someone else wrote. Like there's not the level of assumption that like this is purely for you yourself, and that like there's a sort of decoupled ownership model of the work.
Yes. Yeah, it is very cooperative. Yeah. Like you're not writing an RFD, as Sean is saying in the chat, you're not writing an RFD to like look good in a perf process or what have you. Yeah, that's right. Well, no, because I think it's actually really important, because I think that aspect of it, I'm glad that you're identifying that. And Steve, thank you for reading Sean aloud. Because that aspect of it is really important, because it allows someone to weigh in with their expertise without having to actually like, I've got a lot of thoughts on this problem, but I've got other things I need to go implement. So now someone has got the ability to go understand those thoughts. And of course, like understanding like why we've done certain things or what have you. And we're getting more and more of our own RFDs out there publicly. I'd like to get a lot of them out there publicly, but we've got some of them are, I think will at least some of them have to remain private, because they represent material that's under NDA with various vendors. But I think a lot of them can be public. Certainly our hiring process is one that's out there. Actually, I loved I don't know if you saw Matthew got a great post. Matthew, I'm not sure if that was Mastodon or a blog entry I saw. I guess it was a blog entry on. I had a great post on observability. I don't know if you saw this, Adam, but Matthew ran across RFD 68. He's like, oh wow, that is actually really helpful. Which RFD 68 is an RFD that describes kind of how we think about partnership and how we kind of select a partner and differentiating partners from vendors. And that's been really important for us. That was an early one that we wanted to get out there, because we send that RFD to partners. Be like, this is what we're looking for. And what we found is that like that just the presence of that RFD, and Adam, I don't know if you experienced this, but certainly early on, just the presence of that RFD and that document and sending it to people was an interesting kind of litmus test, because the people that we really wanted to partner with love that document. They're like, oh, this is great. This is exactly the way this is putting words to things that we have thought internally at, Samtech, or we have thought internally at, kind of pick your partner. And, someone who's like, I have sent it to others, perhaps multiple times, and perhaps not always under the best of circumstances. And I noticed I'm not sure the doc's getting read. That's helping to inform. It's like, maybe this marriage is not going to last with this particular part or what have you, because we don't. And Matthew dropped the post into the chat about like, and so Matthew was using that as kind of a lens for the observability companies that he was looking at, which I thought was really interesting. To me, it's great to be able to put that stuff, one, to be able to write it for ourselves, but then to be able to share that thinking with others. And Matthew, for you to pick that up and use that as your own kind of rubric, I thought was great. And so I think that Adam, I think highlights a bunch of aspects of the RFP process that have been really terrific.
Now, of course, there's also the elephant in the room, and you always ask me which elephant. In this case, like, you know, what's weird that we do as a company? This like
is
that
weird.
we do this podcast and that we get people.
You're doing the weird thing right now,
right?
I am
that we get folks from the team often on the back of a demo Friday. Folks, I mean, I'm kind of pulling back the curtains. Often we see a great demo. And then, you know, Brian and I are DMing each other saying on chat, which instead of email, I don't know why, and saying we got to get them on the show. And we, you know, folks, you know, from the storage team were on recently. Helios was on earlier this year. Getting folks not just to talk about their work internally, but talk about it publicly and talk about it in this forum, talking about all of you. And I think for a lot of folks, it's both terrifying and motivating.
Yes. And I think that, like, and obviously, like, we don't want to push everyone into being an oversharer, and it's totally fine if people aren't comfortable with it. That's great. Like, I'm not, but I think it's been great to also give a vector for those folks that are interested in it. And then I think what's been great is some of those folks have then been picked up. I don't know if you saw, did you listen to Nathaniel's interview on MicroArch Club?
Yeah.
I thought it was really neat that you know, Daniel had kind of listened to Nathaniel here on Oxide and Friends, and then asked him to be on his own podcast, which is really terrific. And by the way, if other companies do this, like, again, I don't think we've got other companies can take whatever of our weirdnesses they want, but if any other company has a podcast like this, please point us to it, because I would love to listen to them. I think it's interesting to get like an inside view into, you know, kind of a way a company thinks. So yeah, Adam, you're right. That is the elephant in the room.
Totally. And also to anyone who's thinking about this and they're like, well, you know, we could do it, but we'd be talking to nobody. We sort of were talking to nobody. Like, you go back and look at the podcast stats, like we get numbers in a day that like used to take a month and a half for us to get. So I would just say for a long time, we were just talking to ourselves. And I think that there's still a tremendous amount of value in that.
Oh, for sure.
Like, even
especially if you're recording it. Yeah.
That's right. So like, I think not getting wrapped around the axle about like how big the audience is. And certainly we don't track any metrics we don't have any goals for the show. We're not advertising on the thing. You know, we're doing it because it's a part of our culture, because it's the thing that we do, and because it's fun, and because it's interesting, because we learn stuff, and actually every once in a while some prospect does stumble in, and that's great. But yeah, it's just a thing we do and become part of our culture.
It is. And I think, it's also true. People are saying this in the chat, like, hey, this also reflects your culture too, that it reflects the transparency that a lot of companies, people will be nervous about what to say on the podcast, what not to say. And the fact that we're like, no, clearly you can say whatever you want, because obviously we're just like, I think this is where our lack of intro music is actually helpful, Adam. And just like, no, you jokers clearly are just yakking on. So, keeps it casual. But yeah, no, it's been really terrific. And it's been, whether it has been reflects our culture, drives it, or what have you, it's been a lot of fun. As folks saying in the chat, like, even if it's not getting customers, it's getting folks that are defending us on various forums. Thank you very much for you, those of you on fighting the good fight on Hacker News or Reddit or wherever.
In the comment mines, toiling away in
the comment mines. Awesome. Well, all right. So, are there any other? We hit the elephant in the room. I'm glad that we did. Are there any other elephants, Adam? This is a pretty good tour of idiosyncrasies, though. I think we've hit on a lot of them.
I'll just maybe just a very small one, but compensation is even. We talked about that, but benefits are great. Like, healthcare benefits are great, and it's. I don't know. It's something that, like, especially folks with families really appreciate, that Oxide, like, it doesn't just say, hey, we're friendly to folks of diverse backgrounds or folks with families or whatever. Money where your mouth is. When people get apprehensive about joining a startup, and we say, well, look, we're going to healthcare for all your kids, so we must be serious about this aspect of it. Healthcare benefits for folks with different kinds of needs. We must be serious about it.
I've got a fun random
absolutely.
anecdote on that actually from recently. I have gotten a therapist this year. It's been great. I selected her based purely on selecting. I was like, I'm not going to worry. I'm just going to pay out for out of pocket, and I'm going to figure it out later. And even though I'm in Texas, like turns out my therapist 100% covered by insurance. So like that was not even like, you know, and that's often one thing that's like really hard to get people to like have coverage of and like all that kind of stuff. And so just a random like, oh yeah, benefits are really, really good actually.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm embarrassed that people are saying rock and stone in the chat, and I'm having to ask ChatGPT what it means. What is rock and stone? Steve? What is rock and stone? The yes, no.
Okay,
On,
so there is a
on
game
rock and
called
stone.
Deep Rock Galactic that I have played the tutorial of and basically no further. Although there is a new little alternate universe game that I've been enjoying. But my understanding is that that's like, so it's about mining your dwarves in space mining stuff. And I believe that's like a slogan that the dwarves say. That's the only context I know. I don't know anything deeper about it than that.
Well, apparently, like everyone on the planet knows this thing because everyone is. Don't you dare abandon me, Adam. Don't you dare.
no, I was just as lost. I was just as lost.
Thank you. It's like that's what I was trying to tell him. It's about the dwarf mining game, Brian. Everybody knows that.
Come on, loser, get in. We're going dwarf mining.
We're dwarf mining. Well, indeed, rock and stone. Indeed, am I using that correctly? Rock and stone AF.
Nailed it.
Is this lit? Rock and stone. This is where my kids usually beg for me to stop, so I think I'll stop. Well, all right, this has been a fun discussion. And thank you for indulging us as always. Thank you to Matt and to Cliff for kicking this off with again 2 terrific blog entries that were really inspiring to read. And we've got some, Adam, I'm not going to announce anything now, but we've got some exciting shows in the works. So that's all I'm going to say. I'm just going to tease it a little bit.
We have someone lined up for next week who is thinking about backing out, but we're going to really lean on him and have a great show next week.
Yes, it's going to be fun. So
yeah.
With that and how life works again, have you, Adam? How are you? Are we going to do our daily checkup or our weekly checkups too much?
Oh, no. Yeah, I started. It is delightful already. We gotta set a date. So
we gotta set a date. It's gonna be in May. We'll set a date.
Yeah.
We'll set a date this week. I promise. So,
but it's been great. It's been a great recommendation.
Awesome. So How Life Works by Philip Balls. Go ahead and take an excuse to read that and join us for a discussion in May. It's gonna be fun. Alrighty. I guess book clubs and podcasts also an idiosyncrasy. So let's not forget that one. So, all right. Thanks, everyone. Talk to you next time.